Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Sree's daily global COVID-19 show. My name is Sree Sreenivasan, and it's my honor to convene this daily conversation around all things COVID-19. But COVID-19 also means we have to cover politics and the run-up to the November elections. And today, episode 163. We've been on the air for 163 straight days, including weekends and every single day of this pandemic since we started in March. Episode 163 is Trump versus U.S. intelligence agencies. Robert Draper is with us. He wrote this week's New York Times Magazine cover story, Unwanted Truths, Inside Trump's Battles with U.S. Intelligence Agencies. You'll meet Robert in just a minute. Hi, everyone. I'm Sree. I'm the Marshall Loeb Visiting Professor of Digital Innovation at Stony Brook School of Journalism and the co-founder of Digimentors, a social, digital, and virtual events consulting company. Our motto, don't cancel your program without talking to us. Don't even start planning your virtual event without talking to us. We love geeking out on virtual events. My email address is right here. Please be in touch and let me know how we can help you. We are live right now on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube, and on LinkedIn. Please tag a friend who wants to know about what's happening with the intelligence services and how we can understand this very important story. If you're watching us for the first time, we are live every single day. We are live and on scroll.in and Scroll Global. Please check them out. And we have had in our first 150 episodes more than 1 million viewers, 105 million social impressions, 281 guests from 57 cities and 16 countries, including the chief scientist of the World Health Organization. You can find all our archives at youtube.com/Sreenet, SREENET. We're always looking for sponsorships and guest ideas, Sree at Sree.net. We couldn't do this without our producers, Rose Horowitz at Rose Horowitz 31 and Vandana Menon, Vandana_Menon. Please follow them. We also couldn't do this without our sponsors. So big thanks to Muckrack Academy for creating with me the Fundamentals of Social Media course that's available right now. It is free with a certificate. More than 4,000 people have taken this course. I learned a lot putting it together, and so will you. Please check out mrac.co/social, mrac.co/social. A couple of other quick sponsor thank yous, including to Nunbelievable, Divinely Delicious Cookies on a Mission. Get 20% off with the code SREE, SREE. Each handcrafted cookie provides a meal to those in need. One cookie equals one meal. Nunbelievable.com, Divinely Delicious Cookies on a Mission. And finally, big thanks to She's on Call. This is a show that we executive produce on Sundays at 11 a.m. Eastern on Facebook. Two fabulous surgeons, Dr. Sujana Chandrasekhar and Dr. Marina Kurian, host a conversation. You can see last week's conversation on She's on Call on Facebook. Please follow them on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, and on Instagram. And that's Sundays at 11, She's on Call, COVID, and much, much more. All right, are you ready to meet Robert Draper? I'm going to just bring him on. He wrote this week's New York Times Magazine cover story, Unwanted Truths, Inside Trump's Battles with U.S. Intelligence Agencies. We'll show you a little bit of the article, and we'll hear from him and get you to ask questions. Tell us where you're watching from, please. Tell us where you are and what you are interested in knowing about how President Trump is handling the U.S. intelligence agencies. And here we go. Please welcome Robert Draper. Hi, Robert.
Hey there, Sree. How you doing?
Thank you so much for doing this. I know how busy you are. You wrote this cover story on Sunday. It came out on Sunday, and there was even bigger news after that. So the timing was perfect. My first question always, however, is, Robert, how are you doing? How's your family? Where are you based during this pandemic?
Sure. Thanks for asking, Sree. I live in Washington, D.C. with my fiance, and we're doing okay. It's now 5 months since the lockdown began, And that's a challenge for all of us in our own separate ways, but we're faring better than most. So healthy so far, knock on wood. And anyway, all good for the most part. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, I think that's all we can hope for, is all good for the most part as we try to get through this pandemic. So I'm going to just pull up the article here so that people can see it and we can talk about it. Tell us the genesis of this particular story. You've obviously been covering so many aspects of this crisis in terms of the intelligence crisis, but would love to hear the background of the story.
Sure. The real genesis of this story is that I just published a book about called "To Start a War," how the Bush administration took America into Iraq, and that story, that book-length narrative, is about how the 43rd president came to attack a country that had not attacked us 18 months after 9/11, and the very central to that narrative are the intelligence failures that led many to believe that Saddam Hussein possessed weapons of mass destruction. In the course of reporting that book, I met maybe 70, 80 members of the intelligence community and stayed in touch with many of them. Some of them are still working. Many of them are retired. And throughout the course of the last couple of years had been reporting on the Trump presidency, and it's hardly a statement of opinion, but rather a statement of fact that this president has had a very combative relationship, not only with the intelligence community, but really with the basic intelligence that they provide him with. In particular, as regards the matter of Russia interfering in the 2016 election and their intentions to interfere in the upcoming election. The president hasn't liked that because he felt like that just talking about that, and talking in particular about how Russia favored Trump in 2016 and is favoring him again, seems to call into question the legitimacy of his presidency in his eyes. And so he has pushed back against the people who are there to just sort of bring him the ground truth. And so this story was kind of an exploration of just what that means when the president is at war with his own intelligence community.
This is the book that we're looking at, Robert Draper, To Start a War, How the Bush Administration Took America into Iraq. What are the lessons from what you did with the book and what you learned in the book that apply today?
Sure. Yeah, I think I'd say the chief lesson is that experience is not enough. Expertise is not enough. What matters is a concerted pursuit of the truth. And that did not happen in the run-up to Iraq. Instead, as it's often been said, 9/11 was a failure of the imagination. You could argue that the decision to invade Iraq was a failure of relying too much on the imagination rather than on intelligence. A lot of the intelligence we had, as I mentioned before, was flawed. Most of it was just old and paper thin. But even a semi-careful reading of the intelligence regarding Saddam's WMD program would lead you to conclude that, in fact, these were only assessments. These were only semi-educated guesses, that we did not have any hard proof. And to go to war without that kind of hard proof was made possible because people just sort of hypothesized that Saddam, being a bad guy, being someone who'd had WMD in the past, had used them on the Iranians and on his own people, and had appeared to be deceptive towards weapons inspectors since then, must still have weapons, must have reconstituted its weapons program. That turned out not to be the case at all. And so I'd say that the lesson to be learned from that is that intelligence does matter, but most of all, an earnest pursuit of the truth, of trying to understand what it is that you don't know, what you don't know for certain, is important. And that lack of intellectual curiosity led us down a catastrophic path. And it's ironic, of course, because this president campaigned gleefully, even, on the intelligence failures of the Bush administration, and suggested that he wouldn't be so dumb as to follow such flawed intelligence. But the truth is, he hasn't followed any intelligence at all, really, from the intelligence community, which kind of gives rise to the question, then, if he's not relying on intelligence from the U.S. intelligence community, where is he getting his information from?
And that's something that obviously has to worry us all, and we'll talk about that. Just reading out some of the great testimonials and blurbs you've gotten for the book, To Start a War, authoritative, the comprehensive account yet of the smoldering wreck of foreign policy, one that haunts us today, from the LA Times, and a timely reminder of the dangers of embarking upon wars that can imperil America itself. And it talks about your other book, which I loved, Dead Certain, which was about the Bush presidency. Tell us about what you were thinking about in terms of the timing of this book. Obviously, not the pandemic part, but publishing it in 2020.
Sure. I began working on this in 2017, and at that point, we were 8 months into this new presidency, a presidency of a reality TV show star who was a political novice and who bragged about that, who bragged about his lack of connections to Washington, and basically, said that he alone could fix it. That all these supposed experts in Washington had given us were endless wars, not to mention lousy trade deals and other things. And I began to ask myself, how did we get here? How was it that that we came to elect such an individual? And I think that it really has its antecedents, has its roots rather, in the great loss of faith in government institutions that took place as a result of the Iraq saga. A whole generation of people, Sree, have grown up basically believing that the U.S. government's not on the level, and they believe this because they were told by the man in the Oval Office that Saddam Hussein constituted a true threat to American, not just American interests, but to the American homeland, and it turned out to be absolutely false. And Trump was able to profit off of that. So that's one of the reasons. The other, of course, is that I think we're still living with the fallout of the Iraq War in the Middle East in terms of our alliances. I mean, obviously, ISIS has not gone away. Iraq is a very, very unstable country. I don't know that destiny is yet foretold on Iraq. It could well be that the country will eventually stabilize itself, but for now, there are protests relating to government corruption. I guess you could say that at least they're able to have protests in Iraq without getting shot. The new prime minister, al-Kadhimi, was the pick of the Iranian government. And Iran indeed has been, I think, the chief beneficiary of Iraq. So for a bunch of reasons, I feel like this, even leaving aside the fact that it is the most consequential foreign policy blunder of the last half century, and thus merits study for that reason alone. For all the other reasons I mentioned, I think that it's a very present saga and deserves the kind of scrutiny that I gave it.
And I'm so glad that you were able to give us that real look into what made that possible. I love the comparison to the mistakes made in 9/11, warnings of 9/11, and the kind of the correction for it. And that's what led in part to the war in Iraq. Now let's talk more about what's happening today. And if you can catch us up in what would the bipartisan Senate report, that's really important that it was bipartisan. What did that mean? What did it teach us, tell us new compared to what we knew before it came out?
Well, after the Mueller investigation and after the failed attempt to remove the president from office via impeachment, the narrative that was trotted out by the president and his campaign and his supporters was that all of this was a hoax by desperate Democrats. And the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence bipartisan report makes quite clear that there were ample reasons to investigate Donald Trump and his campaign owing to their many ties to Russia. It may well be that there was no collusion. The Senate committee did not find absolute proof of a conspiracy, but there's a lot also that they weren't able to find because there were a lot of documents that they weren't able to get a hold of, certain witnesses they weren't able to speak to. Prominent among those witnesses was the President of the United States, Donald Trump. But what is absolutely clear is that, first of all, the President did Donald Trump did have business interests in Moscow, was trying to build a Trump Tower in Moscow all the way through the middle of 2016, despite the fact that candidate Trump repeatedly said that that was not the case. It is also true that despite Donald Trump's denials on the subject, he had been in frequent contact with Roger Stone, who in turn was in frequent contact with WikiLeaks and knew precisely when these leaks were going to occur and was tipping off the Trump campaign about it. On top of which, the individuals who certain Trump campaign officials were meeting with from Russia weren't just random Russian businessmen. These were Russian intelligence officials. And so the notion that this is somehow trivial, that this was all a politically confected hoax, is really given the lie to by this new investigation report.
And that's why people need to pay attention to it. This is the part I pulled out of the report, Robert, was this letter he wrote in 2007 after seeing Putin on the cover of Time magazine. He obviously didn't read the story, but because Rick Stengel, who's the editor of Time magazine and the Person of the Year issue, he wrote that this is not an honor and has never been an honor, but Trump wrote a note about how great it was, and I'm a big fan of yours, and he underlined it, and that signature we're so familiar with.
Right. I mean, a lot can be said and a lot cannot be said about the president's seeming infatuation with Vladimir Putin. It could just be a genuine, straightforward admiration. It could be that he was attempting to play or to soften Putin so as to get an optimal business deal with Trump Tower Moscow. It could be some darker motive relating to either Putin having some kind of compromising information relating to Trump, or because Trump knew full well that Putin was aiding and abetting his effort to get elected and now to get reelected. I don't know. All of this is seemingly unprovable, perhaps chiefly because Donald Trump has never used email, and he does not tape record his conversations. So this is not Watergate in the sense that we have all this documentary evidence. But what is certainly clear is that the friendship and the overtures and the admiration that Donald Trump has expressed for Vladimir Putin far outstrips the same kind of attention that that one would expect an American leader to lavish on one of our true allies, say the Germans or the British. Trump has really reserved most of his affections and admirations for autocrats like Erdogan of Turkey and Putin of Russia.
And we keep seeing that, and we've not been able to figure out exactly why, except that, as you said, it could be that he genuinely likes that authoritarian, that strongman, the inner strongman in him. Let's see who's watching. Jonathan's watching from the East Village, where at least one U.S. intelligence service once had a satellite office, he says. Rajan is watching from Long Island. Rao's watching from Warsaw in Poland. We have someone watching in COVID. It says COVID Central. That's Florida. Rachel Cooper, who is on the Upper West Side, is watching. She does amazing programming at Asia Society. Rajan is tagging his friends, and Apollo is watching from Vegas. Do you have a Vegas story that you can share publicly?
I absolutely do not have a Vegas story that I can share publicly. The whole point of going to Vegas is not to share any Vegas stories publicly.
All right. I hear that. This report is so important. Why isn't it getting more coverage in the news?
Who can say? It actually did get a great deal of coverage at the time that it came out. We went to press, let's see, I guess 2 Thursdays ago or something like that, and then put it out a day after that. So it's enjoyed extended life, if that's what one can say. We basically put it out on the web 9 days before it appeared on the cover of the Times magazine. The reality, though, and this is true, you'll hear this from many journalists covering the Trump administration, is that there is the news cycle has become rather frenetic under this president. That's not an original thought, and there is one controversy after the next. A day generally does not pass without there being a new one, and so outrage begets outrage, and there's never a dull moment. But it also does not mean that there is extended time to dwell on any one particular scandal. There's a lot to come by and a lot to focus on.
We have about 10 minutes left with Robert Draper. He's at Draper Robert on Twitter. Please follow him. Please ask questions, and we'll go to him for those questions. And after he leaves, we'll look a little more in depth into his article itself, and maybe we'll listen to an excerpt of him talking about the article on The Daily, the big New York Times show, that the podcast that everybody knows. In terms of what he's been doing, isn't it a good framework for an authoritarian? Like, don't let one scandal or one problem bog you down. Just have so many that no one can keep up.
Yes, Sree, is the answer. But I would also caution against sort of looking at everything the president does as evidence of seven-dimensional chess. I think that this is a very impulsive individual, a person who does not think strategically. He'll think tactically, but he's. I think that he possesses a visceral kind of intelligence. He can sense weakness, and he exploits that weakness. He knows where his own weaknesses are, and so I think more than anything else, what we're just seeing is the sheer lack of impulse control that is one of the informing characteristics of the Trump administration, that is in turn leading to a scandal a day or a controversy every other hour. I know that there are people who follow his Twitter feed and assume that he is tweeting something out so as to take away attention from something that is not favorable to Trump that happens otherwise to be taking place. Occasionally, I think that is so, but I also just think that sometimes he just gets angry and puts things out there. And he had said to me before that Twitter was his own private newspaper, his own printing press, and that he could in this way communicate to people, communicate his own id, as it were, without having to worry about being edited.
Can you talk a little bit about the term deep state and how it's evolved? Its origins are not exactly where they are today or how it's used today.
No, well, I mean, it's only been used since the Trump presidency, at least in a meaningful sense. The term has kicked around for a bit, but after all, if there were a deep state, we probably wouldn't have gone to war in Iraq. The deep state of the State Department, for example, and for that matter of the CIA, which may have thought that Saddam had weapons of mass destruction, but really did not think that he would use them against the American homeland. If they had prevailed, then the decider, the 43rd President George W. Bush, would not have taken military action against Saddam Hussein. Under the Trump administration, it is clear that he came in with a deep-seated skepticism, really suspicion about a lot of entities in the government bureaucracy, chief among those the intelligence community, because after all, former CIA directors Michael Hayden and Michael Morrell had been openly critical of him, and then when he took office, they began to openly disagree with what he was terming his foreign policy accomplishments. He was saying that, for example, he had abolished ISIS. He had not. He was saying that North Korea was embarked on a denuclearization thanks to his diplomatic efforts with Kim Jong-un, which was something that the CIA assessed otherwise. He was saying that the whole Russia thing was a hoax, and the intelligence community was uniform in their belief that Russia had, in fact, interfered in the presidential election of 2016. So he's been trying to sell this disagreement as evidence of a deep state, of people who are trying to thwart him. And it's certainly the case that there's been a lot of leaking in his administration, and I think some of them from perhaps Obama holdovers who are in the NSC, who are alarmed by what they see. I don't think they would have done this with any run-of-the-mill Republican president, but are doing it because they have, for example, been greatly disturbed by what the president has said during his dialogues with other foreign leaders. You could call that evidence of a deep state, but the notion really is predicated on this belief that Donald Trump was this outsider, and these ultimate insiders in the bureaucracy do not want to see any outsider succeed for any reason because they are interested in their own entrenched authority and they are trying to push back against him as a result. I just simply do not see a whole lot of evidence of that.
Is there a way for U.S. intelligence to get back its mojo after all of this?
Yes, there is. I mean, it's a lot of important members of a lot of senior intelligence officials have left in a demoralized state. They've retired early. They've gone to the private sector. We've lost some credibility among our foreign liaisons because they're concerned, for example, that if they say something to our intelligence community, and that in turn is briefed to the president, that the president could leak it to the Russians. As I mentioned in my story, one NATO ally said to his intelligence people that he would prefer that they not brief or with their U.S. intelligence counterparts for fear that it would get to Trump and ultimately to Russia. But yes, you could make the argument that what I've just described is largely the handiwork, if that's the word for it, of one man, one president, and so it would follow logically that if that with his removal, there could be a restoration of the integrity of the IC.
Do you think that Russia is actively working right now on the election that's coming up?
Yes, yeah, the evidence is overwhelming that they are. That they are not only putting out disinformation and attempting to suppress the vote, but they are also doing their level best to tamper with our election infrastructure. Yes, the information I have is pretty unassailable on that front. And to their credit, I think the Department of Homeland Security, which has taken the lead on the cybersecurity stuff, has been very, very formidable and put in noticeable energies to combat this. They did very well in the 2018 midterms, for example, but they know that they are facing a much tougher fight for this year. I should mention, Sree, that it has been said by the intelligence community of late that the threats are not just Russia, but China and Iran, and that's really baloney. The chief adversary when it comes to protecting the integrity of our election far and away is Russia. China and Iran simply do not belong in the same sentence with those two. That's not to say that they're not trying to influence people through propaganda, through lobbying and things like that, but they are not trying to hack into our infrastructure like Russia is.
And they will continue to do that. There's nothing that can be done to stop them between now and this election.
Well, there's plenty that can be done to stop them. I mean, it's and it's being done. It's a matter of locating, for example, when the Internet Research Agency was pushing out so much in the way of trolls and bots, we launched a cyber attack on them in 2018. But much like, say, with Islamic extremism, just killing off one does not mean that that's the end of it. It's an ongoing fight, kind of a game of cat and mouse. But I think DHS has is onto the game as much as they can. The sad thing I'll say about this, though, Sree, is that it would definitely help if we had a president of the United States who was very forthright to the American public about this adversary that we face, and would say, don't believe everything you believe on social media. Some of this stuff is coming directly from Russian trolls and bots to try to fool you. Check your sources. Unfortunately, we're not likely to hear that from the president because, after all, what they're saying are propaganda attempting to aid and abet the election of Trump.
Right. In the 2 minutes we have left with you, can you tell us your thoughts on Vice President Joe Biden and what his presidency, if he wins, would look like, and also Kamala Harris and her experience with intelligence and what influence she may have in a Biden-Harris presidency?
Well, in a sense, the Biden presidency, if that does occur, will be somewhat similar to what we saw with the Obama-Biden presidency in early 2009, which is that he's going to inherit a deeply troubled landscape, a wrecked economy, a public health disaster that almost certainly will not have abated by January 20th, 2021. And so he's going to have a lot on his hands, on top of which he's going to need to get other relief packages passed, and that will require working with Republicans who have thus far indicated a real lack of willingness to do so. Let's presuppose that Trump does lose, and he loses considerably, by a considerable margin. It remains to be seen, even under a situation like that, whether the Republicans will interpret that as a mandate against them and a need for them to be more bipartisan, or if Trumpism will continue to be a force, even if President Trump is not. So there's a lot we just simply don't know, but I do think that those are the dynamics that a new President Biden would likely face.
All right, and come Senator Harris, your experience or what you know of her experience?
Sure. Yeah, I've personally never met Senator Harris. I mean, she certainly seems like, I mean, just from a campaigning perspective, she seemed to me to be the smartest choice, because she has been out there in a way that, say, Susan Rice or Karen Bass had not. I think that she's shown that she can take a punch, and she can land a punch herself. She's going to need to, because this is probably going to be the most brutal presidential election in American history, even with it being virtual. I think the president has made it absolutely clear, and again, this is stating a fact, not an opinion, that he will say and do whatever it takes to win. And running mate Kamala Harris is going to have to be ready for that, as will Biden.
All right. We're going to let Robert get back to his very busy reporting and writing schedule. He's the author of To Start a War, How the Bush Administration Took America into Iraq. It starts with this beginning, right, as Paul Wolfowitz is sitting in the Pentagon with the tremors of the attack happening at the Pentagon in 9/11. So I'll talk more about that book after Robert leaves. Robert, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your reporting, and we look forward to seeing your byline in more articles in the magazine in the next few weeks.
All right, thanks for having me, Sree. Appreciate it.
All right, thank you very much. That was Robert Draper. Please follow him, Draper Robert, on Twitter. So busy these days, as you can imagine. And so what I'd like to do is do something where we talk about his work after he's gone. And thank you all for being here, and thank you for watching. Let's take a look at this particular, the start of this is so amazing. As at first, Paul Wolfowitz mistook the tremors in the Pentagon for an earthquake. Such an event would have been rare in the nation's capital, but far more fathomable than what had in fact occurred at the opposite end of the building. It took a few bewildered seconds for him to connect the sudden pandemonium just outside his doorway with the events in New York he had seen on his office television less than half an hour earlier. Uniformed officers entered the Deputy Secretary of Defense's office and instructed him to evacuate immediately. Wolfowitz and his staffers hurried down the E-ring corridor. The entire Pentagon workforce, thousands of them, assembled outside on the parade grounds. Black smoke swirled over the western side of the building, where American Airlines Flight 77 had completed its path of destruction a few minutes before, at 9:37 on the morning of September 11, 2001. This is how this book starts, and it's called To Start a War, How the Bush Administration Took America into Iraq. We hope you get a chance to check out this book. We're so grateful to Robert for being here and for talking about the book, as well as his New York Times Magazine cover story, which came out a few days ago, but ran in the magazine this particular week. Let's take a look at this. Unwanted Truths Inside Trump's Battles with U.S. Intelligence Agencies is the name of the article. And last year, intelligence officials gathered to write a classified report on Russia's interest in the 2020 election. An investigation from the magazine uncovered what happened next. And what I'm going to do now is to play an excerpt from The Daily, the show that is on the podcast that's so popular. We're going to listen to that while we and you'll hear Robert's voice a little bit as he talks about this article. And you can see this is almost, this is such a long and detailed article that's in the Times Magazine. And I recommend everybody read it. It's called Unwanted Truths Inside Trump's Battles with U.S. Intelligence Agencies. So let's play this and let's take a listen.
Hey, I'm Robert Draper. I'm
a writer-at-large for the New York Times Magazine. And I have a story coming out on the cover of the August 16th edition. And I came to this story in a pretty unorthodox fashion. It was a tip that was provided to me by an intelligence official whom I'd known for a while. And the tip was rather alarming. It indicated that a very sensitive government document, a product of the intelligence community, known as a National Intelligence Assessment, had been altered. Changes in government documents take place all the time, but what was alarming and unique about this particular one was that the change was made out of fear that leaving it the way it was might upset the president. So this became the point of departure for what would be a 5-month investigation into this very fraught relationship between a president who has narrative preferences of his own and a community of individuals whose job.
These are the key takeaways in the article, that Russia favored Trump to help Sanders, draft says. An intelligence chief is out and the draft is revised. And the second intelligence director has shown the door. Anger and anxiety from day one. These are the points that are made in this article if you don't have time to read the whole thing. And you can find the article is linked in the post that we have done for this show. We are so grateful to all of you for watching. Nikhil says, great to hear Robert and his sensible views, and that's good to have. And Rahajan says, thank you, Mr. Draper. I look forward to reading your book. We had an earlier show than usual today because we wanted to give people time to watch the DNC tonight. We'll give that same timing because tonight you will see that Vice President Biden will be speaking today. We'll do the same thing when President Trump is speaking. We'll have our show earlier or later, but will not overlap with the speech by the two principals running for the presidency of the United States. Thank you all for being here. Really appreciate it. You can check out the entire conversation that we had with Robert on these channels as soon as we're off the air. They will run again. And Jonathan says it's a scary report. Thank you. As always, we're looking for ideas for this show. We are live every single day on these various channels, on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube, and on LinkedIn. And if you have thoughts on people we should bring on, you have ideas on guests I should have, themes we should cover, please let us know. We are committed to having this daily show at least through the election. And I'm learning so much every day, and I'm sure you are too whenever you get a chance. And if you ever want to go back and look, youtube.com/Sreenet has the entire archive that you can find. And we would love your feedback and thoughts on this. We want to thank, as always, our sponsors for making this possible. Nunbelievable.com, divinely delicious cookies on a mission, 20% off with the code SREE, S-R-E-E. Each handcrafted cookie provides a meal to those in need. One cookie equals one meal, a chance for you to support Nunbelievable and what it does, but also the chance to support this show. Use the code SREE, S-R-E-E, 20% off. And we want to thank our friends at Muckrack and Muckrack Academy for helping us put together Fundamentals of Social Media, a free course that anyone, anywhere in the world can take. And you will learn all kinds of really useful stuff about Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. This is the certificate you get. Lauren Mack showed us her certificate. And please sign up. The address is mrac.co/social, mrac.co/social, and more than 4,000 people have taken that course. Promotional consideration also provided by...
Hi, I'm Dr. Sujana Chandrasekhar. I'm an ear, nose, and throat surgeon in New York City and New Jersey.
And I'm Dr. Marina Kurian. I'm a general surgeon in New York City area.
We'd like to introduce you to our new show, She's on Call. We air live on social media platforms from 11 a.m. to noon every Sunday Eastern Time. We discuss the medical topics of the week.
We have two great guests, experts in their field, that help us analyze and look at some of the topical issues of healthcare. And we are on 11 to 12, so please join us.
We'd love to answer your questions, so please share and watch and send us your questions and comments.
See you Sundays at 11.
Thank you all. And please do follow She's on Call. You can find it on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and on LinkedIn. And also want to tell you that what we have coming up tomorrow, Friday, we're doing a show about schools reopening. So watch for that. We're always looking for ideas, so be in touch. And then Saturday is Save the Post Office Day. So we're going to talk about the U.S. Post Office and efforts to save it. And we're going to put some historical context into this. We're going to meet two professors, Richard John of Columbia University and Manisha Sinha of the University of Connecticut, who are going to talk about their research and history that will help us understand the real problems with going after the post office the way they are now, the way this administration is. You should know that during the days of slavery, slave owners would break into U.S. post offices, burn abolitionist literature. That's how bad the situation was. Those are the people with whom this president is siding when he goes after the post office. And it's so horrifying. But as we've learned and heard, there's so many horrifying things, it's hard to keep track. So join us for an early episode, 9 a.m. Eastern Time on Saturday, this Saturday, for episode number 165. Thank you very much, everybody. Want to remind you that you can also connect with us through this very easy to use QR code. If you have your phone right now, point your camera at it, and you will be able to be added to my WhatsApp alerts when we are live. It is not a WhatsApp group. It is just an alert, and you will know very gentle alert when we are live. So if you would like to know when we're live, please do get in touch with us so you can join us. We also, don't forget, we have a terrific show on Sunday mornings called the New York Times Read Along, where we read the New York Times out loud. We've been doing it for almost 5 years. It's a little crazy that we do it, but we've been doing that. This past Sunday, Veronica Chambers was with us. She's the editor of narrative projects at the New York Times and the author of Finish the Fight about women's suffrage. And it was the 100th anniversary when she joined us that morning to talk about the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment passing, the right for women to vote. And that same evening, we were also able to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the Negro Leagues Baseball and Negro Leagues Baseball Museum with an interview with Bob Kendrick, the president of the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. Just two examples of the amazing shows you can find on youtube.com/SreeNet. Please hit the subscribe button. It makes a big difference in how people find our work. And big thanks to our two producers, Rose Horowitz at Rose Horowitz 31 and Vandana Menon, Vandana_Menon. Please follow them and thank them for the work that they're doing to make this all possible. Every single day we've been live during the pandemic, and we're going to continue through the elections. Thank you very much, everyone.